We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You're listening to Carousel Sniper Victim, a Dead Glass Design production, with your host, Sean Jeffrey.
I was only 6 years old when my father died in Central Australia. It wasn't until I was grown up that the significance of what he was trying to do started to really mean something to me. Over the years, as a result of pretty extensive research, I became more and more convinced of the existence of the reef. I also became more and more determined, for the sake of the Lasseter family, to locate the reef and prove its existence.
I can see some hills, but I can see that a little bit more elevation would have been better.
All the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle are gradually coming together, and I feel confident that provided I can keep up the effort, one day I'll find it.
The words of a dying man. So what do we have here, Paul?
This is the original diary kept by Harold Lasseter in his last months. It was found buried near his body and was given to Lasseter's widow.
That's very interesting, isn't it? What good are reef worth millions? I would give it all for a loaf of bread.
Yes. He doesn't believe he's a fraud. He believes that there is a reef there. And exactly what he says there. He's, this wonderful reef.
Picture this. You're in the blistering heat of outback Central Australia. The year is 1931. You're out of water. Your camels have just bolted, leaving you alone, struggling to find the strength to keep going. You're going to die. It's shit, but it's true. So what do you do? If you knew it was your last few moments on Earth, would you write a last will? Perhaps scratch out a final note in your diary to your loved ones, maybe with some hope that someone will find it later. Or would you continue telling a lie? A lie that has caused you a lifetime of problems. Would you continue to tell that lie, even though you know this could be your last chance to confess and come clean? This is the scenario faced by Harold Bell Lasseter, a gold prospector who met this fate in the Central Australian desert in 1931. Harold was out there looking for his famous lost reef. Over 2 decades earlier, after becoming lost following a failed ruby expedition into the Australian outback, Harold had decided to head west, through the desert, rather than back east to Queensland with the rest of his group. This decision to head west would result in one of the most enduring gold rush legends in Australian history. On his way west, Lasseter supposedly discovered a rocky quartz reef sticking up from the surrounding desert floor, around 16 kilometres or 10 miles long. A fabulously rich gold deposit with, quote, gold as thick as plums in pudding. Harold Lasseter would never live to reveal the location of this lost reef. Many believe he was a liar and a fraud, and that no such reef ever existed. So this brings us back to what would you do? You're in the desert, it's your final moments. Want to know what Lasseter did? He didn't come clean. He didn't apologise and say it was all some sort of story he'd made up. a ruse to fool some stupid investors and get some easy money. He did not seek forgiveness for a life wasted in some fantasy quest of his own imaginings. Instead, he wrote a message of lamentation to his wife in his diary, telling her she would be rich and he was sorry he wouldn't be there with her. Quote, "What good, a reef worth millions? I would give it all for a loaf of bread." Up until his last dying moments, Lasseter believed in his reef. To him, it was no fool's quest. Harold Bell Lasseter was born Lewis Hubert Lasseter in 1880 at Bamgarny, Victoria, Australia. Though self-educated, he was literate and well-spoken, and was commonly described as eccentric and opinionated. He travelled in both Australia and the United States and worked in a variety of occupations, marrying twice and fathering 5 children. In 1929, Lasseter began writing to various federal and state politicians claiming that decades earlier he had discovered a rich gold-bearing reef in Central Australia. Lasseter claimed he had travelled to the area in the search for rubies and had stumbled upon the gold reef by accident. However, he did not receive support from any politicians and instead turned to the Australian Workers' Union. On the 30th of June, 1930, Lasseter visited John Bailey, then president of the Central Branch of the Australian Workers' Union, at his central office in Sydney, and told him about his life as a qualified sea captain and explorations he had taken in Central Australia when he was 17. The lure of gold at the time of the Depression inspired enthusiasm from many quarters, and the Central Australian Gold Exploration Company was formed with Bailey as a director, lending support to Lasseter's claims. Lasseter was employed as a guide and would be paid £5 a week for his services. By 1930, when Australia was in the grip of the Great Depression, the attractions of desert gold were much greater, and Lasseter succeeded in securing approximately £50,000 in private funding towards the expedition to relocate the reef. The well-resourced expedition was formed, led by Fred Blakely, an experienced prospector and opal miner, with Lasseter as the guide to search for his mysterious reef. The expedition travelled with a Thornycroft vehicle, a 6-wheel, 2.5-tonne truck, which had been donated by the manager of Thornycroft Motors. This vehicle was packed full of supplies for the journey and loaded onto a railway truck at Darling Harbour to be transported to Alice Springs. On the 21st of July, 1930, the group left Alice Springs for Ilbilba. Lasseter was, quote, a sullen companion and a vague guide. This expedition was the first to include the use of a light plane, a gypsy moth, which was renamed Golden Quest for this journey. The plane, however, was short-lived, perhaps an omen for the upcoming expedition. The pilot, Errol Coote, attempted to take off from a makeshift runway at Ii Creek in Central Australia, which proved to be too short. A wing clipped part of a fallen tree, and the plane ended up upside down, standing on its nose with both wings damaged. A replacement aircraft was provided, which was named, strangely enough, Golden Quest 2. Fred Blakely, in his book Dream Millions, described Harry Lasseter as a, quote, little nuggety fellow with a darkish complexion, flat chubby face with no nose bridge. He was partly bald and his scalp showed many deep scars. He was a man of jumbled moods and never quite happy. If anything went a bit wrong, he sulked. Lasseter's special pastime was to sing hymns, all set to the one tune, for he was a Mormon by faith. He joined that crowd while in America and was a naturalised American. Lasseter kept to himself for most of the journey, writing in his diary and sleeping apart from the group in the cabin of the truck. His lack of knowledge of the area they travelled through produced doubt in the minds of the other members of the expedition that there was ever even a gold reef to start with. On reaching Mount Marjorie, now Mount Leisler, Lasseter declared that they were still, quote, 150 miles, 240 kilometres, too far north of the search zone. Blakely was furious. He was expecting to be told the reef was nearby. Exasperated, Blakely declared Lasseter a charlatan, a liar, an outright fraud, and decided to end the expedition there. The rest of the group parted ways with Lasseter at Ilbilba and decided to head back. Lasseter insisted on continuing the trek, accompanied by a dingo trapper, Paul Johns, and his team of camels. Lasseter, whose behaviour was increasingly erratic, set off towards his goal, accompanied by Johns with his team of camels. One afternoon, Lasseter returned to camp with some concealed rock samples and announced to Johns that he had relocated the missing gold reef, although he refused to reveal its location to Johns. Johns, who by now doubted Lasseter's sanity, accused him of being a liar. An argument broke out, and then a fight ensued. Lasseter spat in the face of Paul Johns, who drew his revolver and pointed it at Lasseter. Lasseter lunged for Johns' revolver, grabbing it in his hands. As he did so, Johns pulled the trigger. The hammer of the revolver came slamming down and struck Lasseter in the fleshy part of the hand between the thumb and index finger, stopping the revolver's hammer from discharging the round. Following the fight, the next morning, furious, Johns left Lasseter to his own devices, saying he was going to return to, quote, civilization. Lasseter himself trudged off into the desert sands with two of the camels. Lasseter would never be seen alive by another European again. After Lasseter had failed to return from the expedition and no one had heard from Lasseter since he was last seen by Johns, a search was conducted by a local bushman, Bob Buck. It wasn't until in March 1931, almost an entire year after the first expedition had set out, that Bob Buck found Lasseter's emaciated body at Winter's Glen and his personal effects buried in a cave at Hulls Creek. From Lasseter's diary, it was learned that after Johns had left, Lasseter's camels bolted, leaving him alone in the desert without any means of sustaining himself or returning back to civilization. He encountered a group of nomadic Aborigines who rendered assistance with food and shelter, but a weakened and blinded Lasseter eventually died of malnutrition and exhaustion, having made a belated attempt to walk from the cave at Hulls Creek back towards Ayers Rock, or Uluru. Various statements by Paul Johns reveal the areas where he and Lasseter travelled and searched while together. It revealed that they had travelled through the Petermann and Rawlinson ranges, then southwest to the Warburton Range. After that, they took a zigzag course, evidently following the ranges eastward to the Western Australian border, ending at the Patati Rock Hole at the eastern end of the Man Range in South Australia. Almost out of supplies, they then returned to Ilbilba, where they had parted ways after the argument and ensuing fight. Geologists have since made various statements as to whether or not there are any possible gold-bearing areas in this region of the country. In 1931, the same year that Lasseter's body was found, geologists accompanying Bob Buck pronounced the region as unpromising, but they only inspected the Petermann Range and the eastern end of the Rawlinson Range, travelling no farther west than an area known as Sladen Waters. In 2014, geologists likened the southern part of Lasseter's search area to the Bushveld complex in South Africa, where gold deposits do occur, and said the region has, quote, high potential. No maps showing the location of the fabled gold reef were ever found, and over subsequent decades, the tale of the reef and its discoverer have assumed an almost mythic proportion. It is perhaps the most famous lost mine legend in Australia, and remains a holy grail for prospectors to this day. So one more time, let's just go back to Lasseter's final moments. Sitting, exhausted and starving, dying by the side of the creek in the middle of outback Australia, hundreds of kilometres from his family and loved ones, with his only company, the local native Aborigines that have cared for him as best they can. His last act is not to seek any forgiveness. He doesn't come clean from a lifelong lie. He knows his reef is out there. He was able to relocate it again. He was so close to striking it rich and proving all the haters wrong. As Lasseter describes it himself in his own cryptic, clue-filled diary, near 3 hills that look like women in sun hats, near the hill that resembles a Quaker's hat, he pegged and laid claim to a gold deposit with an estimated worth possibly measured in billions, and it's apparently still out there, waiting to be found. Hopefully, one day soon, someone will find Lasseter's reef and prove once and for all that old mate Harry Lasseter wasn't so full of shit after all. There's gold in them there hills.
God, fuck, it's hot out here. Hey, what's up everyone? Yeah, how you going? Just out here with my old metal detector, doing some prospecting. Sounds like I've got a keeper here. Hold on, I'm just going to get the old pickaxe out. Get down here and give this section here a bit of a scrape. Sounds promising. Fucking flies. Yeah, how crazy is old bloody Harold Lasseter? Ooh, sounds like a good one. Sounds like a good one. Anything exciting? Fuck. Oh, what's this? It's just a bottle cap. Nothing. Yeah, Harry Lasseter, eh? Anyone want to mount an expedition to go out there and try and find this shit? Because I think it's out there. If you want, like, further information on it, there's a wicked... there's a wicked doco on Netflix called Lasseter's Bones, which is where that little sample was from at the beginning of this episode, the little 20-second bit. That's from the YouTube trailer, so... yeah, you can definitely go check that out. Ugh, it's so hot. But other than that, cheers for listening. We'll break this down next episode with Jack. We're going to talk about how we're basically going to go launch an expedition to find it because, you know, we're going to be rich as fuck and then we're just going to retire. But other than that, yeah, later dudes.
I wrote the master plan, the actual design. Though I'm on a different tangent with no gradual decline. I'm looking for a fragment like it's natural to find. The reflections in this mirror can be magic or divine. Is this tragic for a sign? I happen to combine all the trains of thoughts I'm thinking, yet they manage to collide. It happens all the time, packing back into my mind. I'm trying to strike some gold before I panic in this mind. I'm living in a dream like a rainbow serpent. I try to conquer mountains, I won't pay no Sherpas. I'm trying to make a move, but they play no purpose. I bury all my hopes and hope that they don't surface. I try to spend my time like my days are worthless. I try to mend my lines so you rate my verses. Add a bit of flame when I paint those cursives. I'm just trying to break the chains cause I ain't no servant. Nobody tell me what I'm meant to do. Yeah. Nobody tell me what I'm meant to prove. Nah. Nobody help me find a better clue. Because I'm looking for a message I can send to you. Nobody tell me what I'm meant to do. Yeah, nobody tell me what I'm meant to prove. Nah, nobody help me find a better clue, because I'm looking for a message I can send to you. Tear up the manual, not reading these instructions. Believing these assumptions, I'm just feeding my destruction. Keep it deconstructed, leave it to disruptions. I'ma get my point across before I'm leaving this discussion. Ignoring your suggestions, demanding some silence. No one needs to know just where I planted this virus. Turn the GPS off, I abandon its guidance. I will keep on swimming while you're stranded on islands. I talk in different patterns like I'm practicing my rudiments. If you think you're smart enough, you're actually the stupidest. My predictions are contrived, I'm a futurist. I won't turn to ash if I'm climbing up Vesuvius. Nobody tell me what I'm meant to do. Yeah, nobody tell me what I'm meant to prove. I'm spinning while I'm caught inside my centrifuge. I find it hard to see yourself inside my centric view. Nobody tell me what I'm meant to do. Yeah, nobody tell me what I'm meant to prove. Nah, nobody help me find a better clue, because I'm looking for a message I can send to you. Nobody tell me what I'm meant to do. Yeah, nobody tell me what I'm meant to prove. Nah, nobody help me find a better clue, because I'm looking for a message I can send to you.